Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your attention to my presentation. It's my great honor to get the precious opportunity of sharing my project on rural to urban migrant women living in Chinese urban villages. This is interdisciplinary research that I've spent 8 months in 2020 involving architectural research, gender studies, urban anthropology, urban sociology, and the other related fields. It considers and reflects the development of urban villages, Chinese domestic migration, the evolution process, and development trade of gender and space. This project aims to understand how to explain various urban and architectural phenomena from the perspective of rural to urban migrant women, and to interpret the roles of patriarchy and feminism in Chinese migrant women's struggle for spatial and urban rights. Hopefully, the understanding of those problems may provide guidance for helping this socially and spatially marginalized group. I decided to do this project in April last year, which was undoubtedly a challenge in the context of the COVID-19 epidemic at that time. Actually, instead of rushing to determine the site and research samples at the beginning, I spent 2 months understanding the Chinese domestic migration situation and rural to urban development in modern China. China's modern immigration wave started with the reform and opening up in 1978 when a lot of development opportunities emerged in big cities, represented by Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. This motivated overwhelming rural people to actively flock to big cities in research of a better life and a promising job. So till now, China as a populous country has a large and frequent domestic migration participated by 277 million immigrants. At the same time, as a product of urbanization since China's reform and opening up, urban villages parasitize a large number of rural to urban immigrants. The combination of those two socially sensitive keywords, I mean urban villages and rural to urban migration, have witnessed the sharp problems in China's urbanization process for decades and has directly or indirectly stimulated numerous discussions on the relevant branching topics. I collected the relevant data and made a lot of maps and found that Guangzhou as the third largest city after Beijing and Shanghai in terms of the number of immigrants has a large number of urban villages, some of which have even appeared in literature and artworks. Moreover, because the labor intensive industries occupy a significant proportion in Guangzhou, immigrants here are more labor workers from the less developed area compared with Beijing and Shanghai. Therefore, my research site is set in Guangzhou. Through a series of analysis of Guangzhou's urban development, I finally focused on Tianhe district, which is the fastest urbanization area in Guangzhou. So, with the extremely noticeable close proximity on even development, the conflicts here are super intense. In June last year, I screened three representative urban villages as case studies. They are Xian Village, Meiyuan New Village, and Kemulang Village, respectively. They largely show the different urban village development levels, from high to low, from fast to slow. After determining the research site, I then selected three distinguished migrant women in urban villages with the consideration of their basic conditions, including occupation, family structure, social network, migration experience, living time in the urban village, and so on. Then I managed to obtain the permission of them and their families to conduct my investigation. Tang is both housewife and migrant worker who moved to Guangzhou with her husband 4 years ago. Being struggle with life and job, she has been separated from her children and parents for a long time. Chen is a shop owner. When she was a middle school student, she moved with her family to Kemulang village in Guangzhou 10 years ago. She married her classmate from the same village after finishing her studies at a nearby technical secondary school and later born a boy. She now runs a grocery store in Kunlong Village, collaborated with her younger brother, and has bought a property in the village. Yang almost grew up in an urban village. She can hardly remember the memory of coming to Guangzhou with her family members when she was a little kid, and being living in Guangzhou for so many years that her memory for hometown is very vague. She's now a telephone customer service and taken a stable relationship with a man immigrated to Guangzhou many years ago. I did field research in Guangzhou for nearly a month. I investigated by participation, observation, interview, tracking to explore the spatial conditions of those urban villages and the factors affecting spatial practice and subjectivities of the three migrant women. After the trip, I unscrambled the information and data obtained in the field research by diary, mapping, collage, photography, and film from narrative recording. In particular, I made a short architectural film one day by montage technique, which shows the one day of these three migrant women. This is my cross-media exploration from the field of architecture. These works I mentioned above are all displayed in my project blog. When the time goes to September, my project moved to the third stage. From September to October last year, getting inspiration and reference from some participatory researches, I organized a drawing experiment with the participation of the three migrant women, their husbands or boyfriend, and three urban women of similar age. This participatory experiment puts forward the potential strategies and possibilities of ordinary people engagement. The whole experiment was totally conducted in two phases. First, I conducted online interviews with the three migrant women and screened 33 urban village spaces that they like or dislike according to the chats. In the first phase, I asked the 9 participants to rate these spaces on a scale of 10, then circle the what they like or dislike and tell the reasons. After receiving the first phase of feedback, I modified the photos of spaces with Photoshop according to the 9 participants' opinions. Mainly removed some things that couldn't be changed through painting, such as removing the disorderly wares on the wall and clean up the garbage on the ground. Then I covered semi-translucent papers on the processed photos and posted them to the participants again. In the second phase of experiment, I asked them to express their ideal urban village spaces by drawing on the papers over the photos according to their preference and desires. The spatial renovation principle is based on China's latest old building renovation policy introduced in 2020. The reason why I require them to renovate urban villages instead of totally demolishing is that the latest policy about the Chinese urban old buildings clarified the building demolition will be replaced by building renovation, which means from that year on, there won't be large-scale demolition in every Chinese city. After 2 phases of experiment, I finally received 170 drawings in total. During this period, I recorded the experiment process via a stop-motion film. According to the 170 drawings, I found that compared with migrant men, the three migrant women pay more attention to safety, privacy, and aesthetics, such as the conjoined comparison between Tang and her husband. Compared with the urban women, the drawings of migrant women may lack beauty and innovation, but some of their tactics based on their experiences would improve the spatial practicality. For example, Yang adds some fitness equipment in the landscape area. And migrant women tend to take their families into consideration. For example, Chen draw a harrier in front of her shop to protect her son's safety. Moreover, based on their social networks in the urban villages, they often take their neighbors into consideration, which can possibly make their proposals more feasible. In the conjoined experiment, no matter the three migrant women or the three migrant men, they all made a compromise in the conjoined. That is, they chose not to demolish any building in the urban villages, even if the high building density reduces the public spaces and indoor daylighting, because building demolition means the tiniest here have to move out, and the migrants who bought the properties here would not be protected by law, since their properties here are illegal construction built by the original villagers or private developers. The gaps between their imagination and reality are perhaps three aspects. First, the safety hazards, which is reflected in the dark spaces, narrow building gaps, bare electronic wires, L security windows, and the spatial occupation mentioned by the three marked women. The second aspect is about aesthetics. This is directly reflected in the spatial decoration drawn by the three marked women, as well as their head of female characters. Third, the lack of confidence in urban identity is a major reason for their holdback in realizing the changes that they wish to make in their living environment. According to my interview, the three women are not fully certain whether they belong to the city. The uncertainty of Hukou would be a ghost hunting in their lives, because Hukou is the passport to many monuments in their lives, including the rights to buy a property, attend a school, purchase a car, and even have urban medical insurance. Living in urban villages for them is neither a choice nor a lifestyle, but a harsh reality. Furthermore, the process of this research can also provide something worth reflecting on. For example, the three urban women often place themselves in a position of decision makers instead of the local residents. This is a common and fixed thinking pattern that architects and urban designers easily get caught in. Conjoined experiment is actually the reflection, development, and testing of research results in the first two project stages. It's also a collaborative creation between the researcher and the subjects. The purpose of this experiment is to distinguish migrant women from migrant men and urban women through the comparative experiment of their spatial painting, so as to have a deeper understanding of their cognition and tactics for space. Also, the conjoined experiment witnessed the participants' progress of their spatial engagement and awareness. Therefore, it shows the significance of migrant women's participation in the urban village renovation in the future, as well as the feasibility of inspiring women's spatial cognition through participatory research. At the beginning of this project, my works always rely on satellite data, academic literature, and so on, and then visualize them illustratively. Gradually, I discovered the charm of going down from the high platform to do research on the ground, and instead of only sticking to professional drawings, I have started to explore more research methods, such as conjoined experiment, and the potential of audio and visual media. This provides me new access to this subject, and the first-hand materials help me to observe and understand the gender studies and architecture more clearly and comprehensively.